Welcome to the Leverian. We are, of course, always open. Donations appreciated. This is Atlas, hard as stone. Is it any surprise that his story begins with an asteroid? Temple Telemon had cast a spell on the indentured masses with a song that heralded the coming of a great stone destroyer, a god who would shatter the world and lead them to a great rebirth. The Orokin mocked the cult's off-key singing, their spasmodic dancing, but the spell only grew stronger. Telemon broadcasts would oft-times wedge into control channels to spread their doomsday message. For the suffocated lower castes, the notion of something more powerful than their Orokin masters must have been intoxicating. A brutal Orokin crackdown seemed to be working, until an asteroid was detected on a collision course with Earth. The Telemons celebrated it as prophecy writ true, divine intervention. For the first time in living memory, the Orokin showed vulnerability. It did not matter that the destruction would be total. For the Temple, this was a sign of a new age. That's fine. A probe was sent to the asteroid, perhaps seeking proof of divine intervention. It found intervention, though it was anything but divine. The rock had been fitted with colossal steering thrusters, and manning those thrusters, a bevy of well-armed Telemon. Having taken fate into their own hands, they set about a final convulsive dance aboard that rock. Battle cruisers, Orgon missiles, a gale force of Dax. The Orokin could have resolved this in any number of ways, but their enemy was not the Telemons themselves. It was their ideas. Atlas alone was sent. As he crashed onto that rock, his Shikiro helm greeted the cultists. Note the angled ballistic plating and reinforced neck protection. He would soon need both. For years, historians felt this tale of Telemon quite improbable, an artifact of Orokin propaganda myth. Then, on our system's outer edge, we found a debris field of small rocks and dust in a lazy elliptical orbit. Upon these rocks, we find the remains of peculiar stone statuary. The petrified figures, clearly temple members, have been frozen into a tableau of struggle and death. Or was it perhaps a dance? This remarkable find forces us to rethink the entire tale as fact. The Stratum Cyandana, reserved and austere, until you turn it over and reveal the glowing hue of the amethyst crystal within. A breathtaking geode. Imagine its spiraling ribbons as Atlas tore toward the killer asteroid's thrusters. His plan must have been to reorient them and push the rock away from Earth. But, as the story goes, as he neared, the cultists detonated the thrusters' footings and sent them careening into space. They were no longer needed. mass and inertia would carry the rock to its fate. Atlas was out of options, or so the Telemans thought. The Techo are perhaps my favorite pieces in this gallery. Note the intricate, ornate moldings, the complex blades. Quite the contrast from Atlas's otherwise workmanlike appearance. The beauty and craftsmanship conceal the true purpose of the Techo, as indentations found in cultists' skulls attest. I have to wonder what frenzied dance would have been interrupted, or if the whiplash strikes and jabs of the Techo might have blended into the crowd's fitful celebration. Before you, a rare sight. 2 rumblers, painstakingly recreated from fragments of the aforementioned tableau. How these inert and rigid formations are compelled to life by Atlas defies reason. Yet it is true. Consider the confusion of those Telemans as the very stone they worshipped came to life and set upon them. How could they retaliate against such a thing? Like sparring with a landslide. Earth swelled on the horizon as the cult mocked Atlas with their chorus, "The stone shall shatter all." Across the system, every Teleman echoed that final hymn. Children, as far as Neptune, turned their heads from greasy broth and gazed toward Earth. Would that careening stone change everything? Atlas kneeled down, head and hands pressed to the ground in apparent defeat as the Telemon's hymn grew even louder. But Atlas was listening, feeling, the way the stone trembled to the hymn's pitch. The faults within the asteroid became vivid to him, and so a new song rose up. Rumblers, erupting in a godlike rhythm, beating along the faults until Atlas, alone, struck the final resonant chord. A tremor forked through the rock until, all at once, the great asteroid exploded, its dust falling as scintillating rain, sparking across the atmosphere, and then gone. The Telemon's song fell silent, and children, as far as Neptune, turned away and swirled their spoons in greasy broth. Welcome. Try not to touch anything. Grendel. Primal. Insatiable. And, as this exhibit will demonstrate, a creature of surprising compassion. After the fall of the Orokin Empire, a surviving Orokin executor, a violet-scented brute named Karish, lorded over Europa's frozen, famine-struck city of Ridda. Save within his walled manse, the moist and loathsome Karish lived a lavish life, while his frail citizens obeyed every edict in the hope of receiving his pre-masticated table scraps. As the city starved beneath him, Karish commanded yet another feast for himself and his gluttonous sycophants. 12 courses for each of his 12 grafted digestive sacs, and one uninvited guest. There remains a shallow trench through the ruins, as if some colossal boulder had crashed from the manse and rolled down the hill. But what if it had rolled up? Imagine, if you will, Karish's Dax on the day, peering out, dumbstruck by what they saw. They readied no blade, sounded no alarm, as the expanding orb of gristle hurled toward them. And then, in a spasm of giblets, Grendel was before them, his cutlery in hand. The Masseter. Scraps of cloth matching Grendel's unexpectedly elegant Sayandana were retrieved from the site, hooked on the remnants of gilded gates, stained with evidence of his degustation. Indeed, most of the Orokin hangers-on who attended the feast became it, and Karish himself fled shrieking into the hills of Ridda as fast as his 12 exosac levitators would carry him. It came as no surprise to me to find this tiny fragment of Gauss just outside the city. Indeed, if one thing is for certain, wherever we find evidence of Grendel, we're sure to find some trace of Gauss as well. Did they breach the city as a pair? Or did Gauss hang back to intercept returning patrols, generously letting his friend Grendel eat his fill at the feast within? Note the open face, almost more like design. A fitting visage for one of such singular, rapacious predilections. Grendel may hunger, yes, but not with the excesses of gluttony, not when others are in need. Oral history tells of Grendel, newly engorged from his repast, rolling through the miserable slums of Ridda, reinvigorating the sick and the lame, the hungry and the dying, with the power he had stolen, consumed, from their oppressors. Here we have shattered fragments of the manse wall, and the gate, mangled by Grendel's Masseter blade. One can almost see the city's masses, newly rejuvenated by Grendel's healthful blessing, storming the manse. Shattered gates thrown wide, they take back what was theirs, namely, control of their future. See here the scattering of genuine Orokin dinnerware. Worn with time, these must have been used for countless meals, as the people of Ridda bravely weathered the dark times ahead. Many Warframes have speed and litheness, but power, momentum, impact, these require mass. And there, the creased midsection, the seam, does it split? Yawning open with a jagged, vacuous aperture to who knows? A certain Orokin may have found out. That night, the people of Ridda ate their fill, feasting until the frozen mountains lit warmly with the dawn. It was toward those roseate peaks that the Executor had fled, pursued by Grendel. What his fate was, I cannot say. But as the people feasted, so the story goes, they were suddenly struck silent by a strange, deep sound. A rumble carried from mountain to mountain. A single, satisfied belch. Drusus Leverian, welcome. Ivara, the Huntress. This tale comes to us from the secret history of the Orokin court by the historian Porvis. Have you perhaps heard tell of the Myrmidon? No matter. A preternatural beast figure straight out of myth he was. One whose prey had no equal. Warframes were what this villain hunted. It is said a number of frames had been erased from history by this monster. Models who no longer exist on any record. Those who are not remembered. It hardly seemed possible that a single person could stand against a Warframe, let alone destroy it, let alone several. Perhaps Porvis enjoyed the telling a little too much, or perhaps there is something to it. Ivara encountered the Myrmidon quite early in her history. Quite early indeed. A Dax emergency call, so Porvis writes, led Ivara and two unknown Warframes to a convoluted cave system. They found it littered with the bodies of murdered Dax and resplendent with bioluminescent fungi. I imagine the chitinous folds of her Salix Cyandana would have made for excellent camouflage within that malevolent, supernal glow. The secret history tells us that the Myrmidon appeared boldly before the three in a wide chamber connected by many tunnels. Clad in red and gold armor, it gestured to the first Warframe with what Porvis describes as a strange, clutching motion, as if seizing a falling apple. But it was no greeting, as we shall see. The powers of that first Warframe, the recipient of that gesture, promptly failed. The Myrmidon took advantage of the confusion to leap upon the hapless frame and press a palm to the warrior's head. In lurid detail, Porvis describes a flash of the most scintillating emerald light, and Ivara's battle sibling collapsed to hot dust. Porvis tells us he compiled much of this tale from overheard exchanges between members of the Seven and details that remain consistent in courtly whispers. He tells us the second frame suffered the same fate as the first. Reacting, Ivara whirled and promptly vanished. But one clutching gesture in her direction and Ivara's powers fled, her cloaking field nullified. Visible, vulnerable, she loosed a dash wire arrow to a high alcove, but it never came. No escape. The Myrmidon was upon her. The huntress spun, opening fire with Axamati pistols to send that devil scrambling for cover, arm thrown protectively across that twisted, armored head. That clutching gesture was the key. Ivara needed a plan, and she needed it fast. Ivara ran at a wall and up it, hanging there, waiting, as the Myrmidon flipped into the room, blasting the spot where he'd expected her to be. Frustrated, he again made that same elaborate gesture, trying his luck, and she saw it. That bracelet upon the wrist that glowed softly with the movement of that clutching gesture. Ivara flipped from her perch, shouldering her exquisitely crafted Rubico as she did so, and sighted the enemy. Through the Orokin sculpted scope, Hunter and Huntress met eye to eye, each loosing a desperate blast, a bullet from Ivara, a killing light from the Myrmidon. The green light lashed, touching a shoulder plate of Ivara's Avia armor, reducing it to dust. It saved her. Huntress won out, her shot claiming the Myrmidon's device in a shower of sparks. But the Myrmidon's weapon remained lethal, and with it, he lashed out at Ivara in an emerald fury. Ivara hit the ground and sprang into a surrounding tunnel. The Myrmidon shot, lancing a gouge in the porous chamber wall. Ivara pressed her back to a shadowed outcrop at tunnel's end, while the Myrmidon's weapon blazed and cut and chewed through her only cover. As good a time as any to discuss the weapon before you. The Artemis bow. The Huntress's signature weapon, and the tool with which she has wrought so much good. Said by some to be spirit bonded to her. Others say the product of forgotten Orokin technology. What Porvis tells us next displays to good effect what warrior and weapon were capable of. Pinned behind eroding cover, seconds from death, Ivara summoned her Artemis bow, and it came to her. She and weapon as one. Without rising, she pulled back, aimed high, she and arrow as one, and loosed. Under Ivara's guidance, the arrow turned its path and shot down the corridor toward the Myrmidon, and lengthwise through his weapon. Around Ivara, the walls flashed green for a microsecond as the Myrmidon's weapon erupted. And then, silence. What is a bow without arrows? And these arrows? The origin system has never seen their like, able to change their very nature at the whim of Ivara. Sleep, cloaking, rapid fire, they are the embodiment of her legendary versatility. Ivara drew her bow again, this time for her fallen comrades. With inhuman speed, shot after shot snapped and plucked each segment of carapace from the Myrmidon's lean frame. Straps severing, clips popping, he was undressed with swift efficiency by the preternatural accuracy of her aim and rapidity. Even before her final arrow belted the visored helmet from his head, she had the killing shot knocked and ready. There he stood, the Myrmidon, slayer of Warframes. Naked, beauty, symmetry, even the capacity for language, sacrificed for. But his face was a mockery of an Orokin face. Those she was sworn to never kill. The smirk on his pallid, angular visage told her he knew it as well. The grand doors of the Chamber of the Seven flew open. Across that reverberating expanse of polished darkness strode Ivara, dragging her prize. Before the assembled council, she dropped him, and with it, the Myrmidon's battered helmet. Here he would meet justice at the hands of his own people. Here, her fallen friends would be avenged. She beheld the Seven, awaiting their judgment. The Myrmidon got to his feet, cleaning dust from one shoulder with a contemptuous flick. One of the Seven leaned forward, removing a curious thing from their slender head, a lattice of delicate silver, placing it on the elevated, chest-high curve of obsidian that separated her from them. Instantly, the Myrmidon collapsed, lifeless, to the floor. Ivara did not understand. Why? Why? A stately voice intoned her name. There stood Executor Ballas. He told her, "You have been battle and loyalty tested. Your companions, they were found wanting. They failed to adapt, failed to overcome, and so they are no more. But you, Ivara, you shall live. You shall be remembered." Her battle comrades, as we know, were not. Any friend of history is a friend of the Leverian. Ah, Gauss. Ooh, where to begin? Where to begin? Well, the Ceres excavation, of course. The site of the ancient Tower of Ultra. Blastcrete emplacements, air sentries. Its fields saturated with tremor mines. A great fortress for the great lords of Ceres. Until they were pitched from the roof. Immortal bodies erupting on the dread mines below. An insurgency from within. The Dax, sent to reclaim Ultra, fared no better. Those that ran the gauntlet of bore guns were soon cindered in the field beyond. And that's when they called in our fleet-footed friend here. Dual sidearms pulled from Ultra's outer ring of Blastcrete bunkers. Something crashed through those bunkers at great speed. The impact scattering stone and flesh all the same. An unearthly kinetic shockwave. Those insurgents with the misfortune of surviving the initial blast must have seen the Icarius for themselves. The Axeltra, a rapid-fire micro-missile launcher. The smooth polycarbonate barrels still carry a vague stench of ozone. Some think Gauss was a blunt instrument, all speed, with as much versatility as a cannonball. But the Axeltra implies more. It implies surging in, inviting the enemy to consider the blade, then rebounding to let missiles answer their confusion. Not the standard dress helm. This one has specialized control surfaces, angled plating, supreme streamlining. It catches the light in a curious way, doesn't it? When it shines just so, I see myself atop Ultra, a hostage perhaps, peering out across the desolate field, and then I'd see it, a pale glint of light. Dax of the day had a saying, "That which cannot be hit cannot be killed." I can only imagine what they thought when they saw Gauss that day. A gleaming bullet, this Syandana pinned rigid like a flag in a maelstrom, streaking toward Ultra. A stripped-out Gauss airfoil system. These fanciful contrivances contribute the Kubradon's share of this Warframe's acceleration. Strength, mass, density, all held in a delicate balance. Gauss. Front edge. Smooth, heat-resistant composites. Trailing edges. Streamlined. Foiled. This particular one vaguely warped by extreme heat stress. The Saint of Ultra. If the mind wanders, what do you see? I see a vivid, lord-like festival. The tremor mines bursting in a blinding wave, rising toward Ultra, and Gauss, a smear of light, just ahead of the thermal avalanche, fast as fire. No, faster. Hello, hello. Exhibition is that way. Donation box just over there. Nova. Mercurial. Unpredictable. And a miraculous example of harnessed antimatter. It would be a bold fool indeed who tried to tame lightning. One such individual was Wholesome Yer, a freelance problem solver who commanded high fees for his low morals. A deficiency that netted him great success in endeavors where a conscience would have held others back. He is the only figure known to have secured a back-channel charter permitting him to selectively raid certain rails, so long as Orokin ships were avoided. The story of Nova and Yer survives via the captain and security logs of the Orokin vessel Masca's Theodolite. It survives because it was deemed to be of historical importance. Orokin investigators scrutinized every frame of security footage, each line of the captain's log, for assurance that the outcome of this encounter was indeed true. The passenger vessel Masca's Theodolite reported critical problems with her engines. Nova, mistress of antimatter, was deployed to relight the Theodolite's antimatter reactor before the vessel was drawn into the gravity well of a nearby planetoid. 10,800 passengers were at risk. Clipping this Hyandana to herself, she exited her lander. The interior of the ship was deathly quiet. But then, chaos. Behind her, the section of the ship securing her lander was detonated and blown free, stranding her for the time being. From deeper inside the ship, cries for help. Nova sped toward the shouts of trapped crewmen. 8 were locked in flow control behind a hardened glass wall. Opening a wormhole between herself and them, she phased the crewmen to safety as their compartment flooded with lethal gas. Booming from speakers in every hallway, Wholesome Yer declared himself. Wholesome Yer, the man who at one time had run the Pluto Resistance, who spent 3 years terrorizing the rails between Jupiter and Venus just to prove that he could, who took that notoriety and translated it into a career. Security, political assassination, courier runs, torture, graft, blackmail, and in one case, so it was said, genocide. There were graves already dug for him by the many who wanted him dead. Word was, Wholesome already had a tomb prepared for himself on some distant moon, with a table piled high with riches and a chair just waiting for him to be sat in for eternity. A man capable of anything, and a man who would rather die than lose. A man easily recognized by the signature item before you. It was, so they say, an item of great personal significance to the old rogue. Why, and what history it shared with him, is a matter of some speculation. Unaware she was being led into a trap built just for her, I don't imagine Nova took any special precautions. This Flux model helm, for example, was fairly standard. The appealing venting displayed her antimatter nature, an announcement of power as much as an evocation of beauty. Where were we? Oh, aye, yes. Nova and the rescued crew moved for the escape pods. Once they were clear, she would about face and find some way to free the remaining 10,792. Alas, thuds and clangs resounded as every life pod ejected into space. Empty. Yer clarified, boomingly, that escape was not an option. To punctuate this assertion, bulkheads slammed down in every corridor ship-wide. The only path Yer left open, worryingly, was the one that led directly to the Theodolite's antimatter reactor, the very thing Nova had come to save. What was the old pirate playing at? Yer answered Nova's unspoken question. He had jettisoned the antimatter core. Without that, it was impossible for the reactor to function, and the Theodolite would smash into the planetoid in a matter of minutes. Yer had been paid, by persons unknown, to neutralize Nova completely. Yer, a man who prided himself upon an ignorance of the impossible, had agreed and devised this trap. Nova was a being created to contain and harness antimatter. The antimatter drive no longer had a fuel core. His proposition was simple. Nova would enter the reactor chamber, crack her own containment, and kickstart a new reaction using her own body as fuel. She could save 10,800 lives, but only at the cost of her own. She had minutes to decide. With a flick of her wrist, Nova's haiku throwing stars took out every camera in eyeshot, killing Yer's surveillance of them. This done, she turned to the technicians she had just saved. She would need their help. Nova walked to her doom. As she entered the reactor's chamber, Yer smugly assured her she was doing the right thing. Within the reactor's observation room, the technicians nodded assent. This was going to be close. From the bridge, Yer sealed the reactor chamber's blast doors. Seconds later, on Nova's signal, the technicians overrode that command. The doors shot upwards, and Nova wormholed out of the chamber and back into the corridor. Leaving that portal open, she created another, straight up into the vent system. On the bridge, Yer had little time to react, but react he did, ordering all prisoners to be killed. In that moment, a portal flashed into existence, Nova launching herself amidst pirate, captain, and crew, and showed them what she was made of. In a blinding flash, Yer and every mercenary on that bridge was deeply infused with Nova's antimatter, starting a chain reaction within them. Yer realized what was happening, but too late. With a few precise shots from her Syra-customized sniper rifle, Nova neutralized those mercenaries who were quicker off the mark, before grabbing Yer by his brightly irradiated hair. Hurling him back through her network of wormholes, Nova sent wholesome Yer pinging from portal to portal before tumbling out into the reactor chamber. The wormholes collapsed. Yer struggled to his feet as every molecule in his body approached critical. Behind the glass, the technicians gave him a final, grim salute before slamming the blast door closed. Wholesome Yer, pirate and legend, went nova. The reactor caught the reaction. The technicians harnessed it, and the engines of the Mascus Theodolite roared to life. It was, indeed, the boldest of fools who attempted to leash lightning. And so, a notorious rogue, said to be unkillable, met his end in the attempt, as the historical record now demonstrates. Enjoy, and please, leave something in the little box over there. Ash, Avatar of Murder, patron saint of the Orokin School of Political Assassination, known as the Scoria. Each assassin bore a mark, a swirling, smoky black jewel between their eyes. You are forever the Scoria. The Scoria is forever you. No devotee knew of any life, any thought that was not Scoria doctrine. For every question, so the Orokin of the Scoria said, Ash was the answer. Two notable students of the Scoria's anthracite halls were also two brothers, Dom and Pilio. Dom was nimble, cunning, and a quick study with the blade. His brother, Pilio, however, was not so gifted. While he idolized Ash, worshipped him, Pilio lacked Dom's grace and clarity, and Ash's ruthlessness. However, it was Dom who'd been captured by the very target he was tasked to kill. A sin unforgivable to the Scoria. So it fell to Pilio, the Lesser, to uphold the Scoria by taking Dom's life. By this, the Seven would have assurance that Dom's flaw was not a familial trait. You see, as you might expect of an Orokin school of murder, the Scoria were ruthless when it came to academic excellence. With Dom dead at Pilio's feet, two essential killings would have taken place. That of a failure, and that of any shred of pity within Pilio. Ash would oversee Pilio's mission. Pilio's soul was to die that day, as the life drained from his brother's eyes, or, if he could not do so, beneath the blades of his lifelong idol, Ash. A sliver of pale sun found them close to a stately tower in the dusty heart of Martialis metropolis. Coils of red Martian dust trailed tongues from the dark metal of Ash's Edo epaulets. The boy idolized the Warframe and was eager to prove himself, even as some part of him felt cold and afraid at what he must do. Doubt is betrayal, taught the Scoria. Pilio recited this, but could not quench the fear he felt. Fear of what he must do, and fear of what his hero and idol would do to him should his faith fail. Ash gave the signal. Pilio shot forward in a bold, unconventional dying vine pattern, readying the Scoria-favored dust fang technique. The tower guards squinted into the amber light of the Martian sunrise as a flash cloud of smoke flooded the lane before them. Shaking sleep from their heads and still thinking of breakfast, the guards readied themselves. From the smoke flew stars. Staring into the lifeless eyes of the guardsman at his feet, bile rose in Pilio's throat. The boy berated himself, this weakness, this disgust. Touching the symbol of his order, the smoke gem between his eyes, he muttered a prayer for strength. Stepping over the carpet of bodies, Ash crept into the courtyard, knowing full well the 50-strong house guard would show itself in force. With a sudden clatter, reinforcements lined the courtyard walls, balconies. The Scoria had a saying, "You are immortal. One mistake makes that otherwise." Ash had never made a mistake. Here were 50. With one swift movement, the Warframe swatted the boy into cover, unslung his Corster bow, and sprang into a flawless grey chrysanthemum combat solution. Shame reddened Pilio's face as the courtyard lit noon bright with the glare of 100 muzzle flashes. His blade dry in his hand. Ash methodically met and disassembled each and every guard, mezzanine to mezzanine, a masterclass in the correct choices of stance, kata, technique and attitude. Bodies rained into the courtyard. Wincing, the boy looked away. Within minutes, 50 corpses lay at their feet. When Pilio felt Ash's shadow fall across him, he forced himself to look, trembling. Ash's inscrutable gaze pinned him. Chest tight, breath terrified and quick, Pilio forced himself to stand and face his assessor. He could not look at the bodies. Truthfully, he expected to die where he stood. If the Warframe approved or disapproved, he gave no sign. Rather, Ash opened an arm, showing the way toward Pilio's final trial. In the target's chambers sat a middle-aged man with long, handsome moustaches, his eyes sad and kind, and with him, Dom, in civilian clothes, sharing a glass of aged claret. Cracked through Pilio's brain, the smoke gem between his eyes flashing hot. Sudden images of sunlight, vineyards, a woman's face. The gem burned as it pushed these images away. A young man with grand moustaches smiling and saying, "Of all the sons I could have had, I'm glad it was you two." Pain. Dom leapt to his feet, urging his brother to hear what the target had to say. But Pilio saw only the scabbed-over divot between Dom's eyes, where a black jewel had once rested. Dom had turned his back on their order. Why had he done this? The mustachioed man leapt to Dom's defense, snatching his sidearm from beneath his ironwood desk. A foolish mistake. Ash split into impossible multiples. The man opened fire on the three, before being seized from behind by the fourth. Ash's illusory clones vanished. The weapon clattered to the polished wooden floor, even as his feet left it, dangling 3 feet above, helpless. Those sad, kind eyes locked on Pilio's in a regretful farewell. "Ask the Warframe," Dom said. "He knows exactly why." Fear filled Pilio's heart. Pilio turned to his idol, that saint of murder. The same question, but this time for Ash. Why? That moment of breathtaking impudence stretched for an eternity. Ash released his grip. His prisoner flopped to the floor, gasping. With one great hand, Ash reached toward Pilio's face and sank a vicious talon beneath that midnight jewel. Pilio screamed. Blood flowed. The gem flew free with a nauseating pop, cracking against the wall to die in a weak plume of rancid smoke. Blinding white insight descended upon Pilio de Nas. Pilio was Pilio de Nas. Everything the black gem had walled off within his mind was now laid bare. The Scoria had stolen the sons of Leo de Nas. Leo de Nas, kind-eyed Leo de Nas, was stealing them back. Of all the sons I could have had, I'm glad it was you two. Father and son beheld each other truly for the first time in almost 20 years. Pilio had long aspired to wearing the Edo armor, the highest honor, to signify his faith. But now he saw only the bare ribs of Ash's Cremata Syandana, signifier of death, and knew with certainty that was the sole credo of the faith he had followed. The boy, who until that moment had thought himself a lifelong killer, was now torn between the nocturnal life he thought he knew and the sunlit life he'd been stolen from. Torn between doctrine and family. And, blade in hand, torn between saving himself by killing his brother or dying alongside him at the hand of his idol. Ash waited, patient as the death he signified, in a room, in a moment that felt suspended in eternity, waiting for Pilio's decision. The blade fell from Pilio's hand. Dom reached out and gently took that hand. Ash did not move. Leo de Nas swept his boys up and out of that room, and, as a family, they fled the tower, the city, and Mars forever. Ash did not move. So, what are we to make of this? Why did Ash, focal figure of the Scoria, go against doctrine and permit two boys who were both failures and traitors to fly free? What was it this killer saw in two near orphans that, shall we say, softened his heart? We do not know. Neither did Pilio, whose memoirs bring us this story. But we do know this. In the final days of Orokin rule, as towers fell and death came for the white and gold gods, the Scoria were not spared. No, rather their senior ranks, the mentors and chief assassins, were exterminated to a figure in a pogrom of ruthless and breathtaking efficiency. A near total destruction led, in the main, by Ash. Curious, no? Hello again. Nezha, the mercurial firemonger, the clarion of hope. However foul the decadent excesses of the Orokin Empire, the aftermath of its collapse was arguably worse. The darkest times often give rise to the brightest legends. We've seen that happen often, haven't we? Tales of a being called Nezha predate the fall. They speak of a swift warrior who leaves trails of fire, summoning barbed spears from the very earth. But it is during a time of unsurpassed brutality, at a moment of wanton slaughter, that this most blazingly improbable of Warframes first proves to be more than a myth. This blade, a tongue of exquisite flame in cold metal, it was unearthed by a poor farmer of Reshantur as he followed his hulking plough beasts across fields he would never own. Another might have bravely kept the dagger, but records suggest he handed it into his overseer on the spot. A half cup of rice, his princely reward. With no dax to keep the peace, and no parvus granum to hold the corpus board together, bloody land grabs were routine. The fertile fields of Reshantur changed hands many times. With each hostile takeover, slain workers became fertilizer for the next yield of crops, tended by the survivors. And so it went. This created what you might call a staffing problem. If all the surviving adults are working the fields, then who is left to defend them? Children, that's who. This dismal little relic was once part of a Sayandana, shall we say. Though not of Orican make, clearly. No, its young owner wove this from a fertilizer sack. There were many such capes found at the site, enough for an army. Mowers were expensive, you see. Children, they were cheap and plentiful. It made good business sense to arm them. Not the very youngest, of course, just the near adults. The still unbroken, those who understood the stakes. The young defenders of Reshantur took their duty seriously. They formed into a little clan, trained every day in the ruins of an old temple, and even made themselves a uniform of sorts, part of which you see before you now. But this humble cape was modelled on something even older, the Sayandana of Nejar himself, displayed here before you. This chakram was found in the ruins of the Reshantur temple, along with fragments of stories scrawled on slates in an immature hand, and oaths of dedication to a figure of legend. It seems the child soldiers of Reshantur took courage from the tales of Nejar, adopting him as patron and protector. Their scratchings evince a firm belief that Nejar would bless them with victory should they fight without fear, and abandon them should they ever fear. So they swore they would defend the fields to the last drop of their blood. Clever manipulation. I wonder who put that idea into their heads. At any rate, they accepted it on faith. At least, until the massacre of Reshantur. This spear, modelled on Nejar's own, was found buried in scorched soil. Note the size. Records of the attack are nigh impossible to find. Not surprising. The massacre was almost certainly covered up to protect what the corpus regarded as sensitive business practices. Imagine the children, Tenno, wearing their pathetic Sayandanas, bearing flimsy weapons, but with heads high, as warriors. Think of them rushing at their far superior foes without fear, and imagine what those foes did. To this day, the fields of Reshantur cannot be ploughed. The blades of ploughs are dented and destroyed by an earth that, still, remains thickly seeded with shot and shells and the cold brass teeth of war. But that is not why the event is called the Massacre of Reshantur. The children charged, the corpus took easy aim, not one child's heart fluttered, and then... flame! The corpus surveyor, Yena Zasperin, says she found a solitary child wearing this helmet in the midst of a charnel field of remains. But they were the remains of corpus troops, some dismembered, some impaled, all burned. Nejar did it, the boy said calmly. He flew down from the sky and tore the enemy asunder with wheels of flame. When a child fell, he would raise them up again. Nejar moved quick as a scimitar, and the earth burned where his feet touched. Now the others had gone with Nejar, part of his celestial army. The boy had stayed behind to tell the story. To Zasperin, the boy was merely traumatized. The massacre, probably a mutiny within the corpus ranks. But Reshantur has been excavated, and every single one of the thousands of blackened bones that were gene-tagged had belonged to an adult. And at last we meet Nejar face to face in all his unquestionable reality. Did this Warframe model itself on the myths to take on the mantle of a mythic hero, or were the myths left in the Warframe's wake, a blazing trail to light the way? History will always be some manner of educated guesswork, and occasionally one of faith. Perhaps in some deeper stratum, we will find the lost children of Reshantur, sad little clusters of bones, not saved at all. But I have faith we will not. I leave you with this. Why do you suppose it was the child soldiers that Nejar chose to protect? Any war has its innocent casualties, but these seem to have called to him. What could a Warframe, a lethal specialist warrior, possibly have in common with a child? That riddle, I fear, must remain a riddle. Greetings. What piques your interest this fine day? Lavos, the Transmuter, called by some, anachronistically, the Alchemist. Transmutation, you say? A superstitious process from long ago in which deranged old men heated stinking substances over fires of dung, thinking they could make gold? No. To the Orokin, it was a darkly potent, forbidden science. They were not squeamish, nor moral. So what profound taboos must this art have violated? No transmuter was more dreaded than Yavi, the crawling serpent, the abhorred, the filth speaker. The Orokin feared him so greatly that they whispered he might somehow survive even the Jade Lion, just as a severed snake was once believed to grow a new head. So instead, he was imprisoned that his evil might be contained, if not quenched. His jailer was a brute of a Warframe named Lavos. The prison of Dabayoth Kra no longer stands. Both it and the slumped Venusian mountain peak upon which it stood were long ago obliterated. We have only records to tell us what went on there. Yavi was a scrawny, hairless man, scaly with skin disease. In reluctant recognition of his Archimedean status, he was permitted to wear the white robe, now a befouled, ragged garment. 2 tattooed serpents crawled up each bony arm from elbow to wrist. Lavos, we are told, was attentive to his prisoner. He administered the prescribed soup, water, and beatings with the same punctual fidelity. These are recreations of Lavos's own snakes. No mere tattoos, but living, bioferrous exoflesh. Observers at the prison reported that Yavi was frequently whispering to Lavos. There was some concern among the wardens, but they dismissed the whispers as mere posturing. Yavi's cell walls began to fill up with scrawlings, using blood and filth as ink. At first, these were simple symbols, but as time passed, they became more elaborate. It was as if the Archimedean was turning his cell into a demonic temple, baiting his captors. There was even an image of Lavos, resplendent in his cyandana of office. Perhaps an attempt at a curse. Lavos was ordered to beat him harder, and duly did so. With the blood on the wall, Yavi drew a snake. An appeal, no doubt, to his depraved idol. Floor washer Bekran Zaft, the sole survivor of Dabeoth Kra, would later tell of how Lavos would stride from cell to cell, weighty shotgun in hand, clubbing and beating as required. The nightmares still haunted her. The Warden's records reveal an increasing unease with Yavi's bizarre behavior. Regardless of the potential risk, they determined that he should be executed. After a fashion. They would use cellular reversal. Yavi would be reduced to a mere biological pulp with no more sentience than bread mold. But the executioner? No jailer wanted to be the pobber to bell that cavat. So Lavos received this ceremonial helm, along with the power to reconfigure organic matter. He could be their instrument. The walls, floor, and ceiling of the cell were, by now, overwritten with text. Lavos watched over Yavi continually. Bekran Zaft tells us that, curiously, Lavos no longer beat the prisoners in the other cells. Even when the inmates shoved one of their hated fellows into his path, expecting a bloody beatdown, Lavos merely waited for him to get back to his feet before moving on. What actually was this forbidden practice of transmutation that terrified the Orokin so? At its pinnacle, it was nothing less than the purposeful elevation of consciousness. To the Orokin, prisoners of their endless golden dream, the thought that a person could rise above their station was anathema. Transmutation could turn commoners into kings, or riches into garbage. Worst of all, it could teach people not to be afraid. I have seen a preserved image of Yavi's cell. His scrawlings were not demonic sigils and barbarous texts, but star charts, evolutionary trees, genome structures. Yavi was not defying Lavos with these cryptic daubings in his own blood. He was enlightening him. Not dark sorcery at all, but radiant science. And the snake? A symbol not of corruption, but of healing. Yavi was a teacher. He might have taught millions. Now he had only one student, but that student was attentive. Bekran Zaft says this of Execution Day. The jailers gathered in the auditorium with a slow, funereal tread. Lavos escorted Yavi to the execution dais. He gently raised a hood over Yavi's head, cobra-like. He turned, then, to face the Orokin Warden, shotgun trembling in his mighty hands. The silence, Zaft says, was absolute. But then, from beneath the hood, came a whisper. Yavi had some final words for his student. The Orokin jailer shifted uncomfortably, looked to his functionaries. Would the execution even take place? Lavos gave a stiff bow to Yavi and activated his power. Yavi's skin peeled off in one grisly sloughing. He liquefied into a biological suit. A cheer went up from the assembled jailers. Lavos gathered the remains of Yavi tenderly in his hands. A soft glow emanated from them, as, in one horrible moment, Yavi's Orokin oppressors realized what they beheld. And then, panic. Lavos was transmuting the remains. A twining, living snake seethed up Lavos's left arm. Yavi, transformed, and still, after a fashion, alive, just as they had feared. A second snake coiled around his right arm, this one sprouting from Lavos's own flesh. Then, Lavos leapt into the midst of the assembly, hurling vials left and right, bathing the hapless, screaming jailers and functionaries and their warden in icy vitriol. Not one survived. Not for long, anyway. And Bekran Zaft? Lavos bowed to her and moved on. They say that Lavos often takes counsel from his serpents. One is his brutal advisor, the other his wise teacher. Both have their wisdom, and Yavi still whispers to his beloved student. Much like the snake, Lavos is easy to misjudge. The serpents that poison can also cure. He may have been a monster in his previous life, but he was able to achieve something that eluded the most powerful of the Orokin. He changed. Moreover, he changed himself. Yavi may have helped and instructed, but the will to change must have begun with Lavos. Perhaps we all have that golden gleam coiled within us somewhere, ready to slither forth from its old skin. We must only beware that we do not condemn as devilish that which we do not yet understand.
Keep moving. None of the scanners have detected you. Be on the lookout for increased security measures. The enemy would rather destroy their data than let it get into our hands. There's a heavy unit approaching. A juggernaut nearby? It will only attack when it senses high concentrations of infested blood. Slow the fight if you want it to go away. The juggernaut has moved on. It's safe to proceed. Have everything we came for. Get to extraction. Stay focused. There's a heavy unit approaching. Excellent work, Tenno. This is a mobile defense mission. You must deliver payloads and defend a number of locations while I break into the network. Be prepared for heavy resistance. I can't do this without you. Here is a terminal. Get me in and get ready to defend. I'm in, Tenno. This will take a moment. That was a juggernaut. They were lured out by the death of Festive. Lay low, and it should go away or amp up the fight to draw it out. On it. Continue to defend. I am no longer detecting signs of a juggernaut. Move on. You are safe. Stay focused. There's a heavy unit approaching. Finished here. Move on. You've got to find a terminal. Proceed and prepare. Multiple biosignatures detected. We've got infested incoming. Terminal spotted. Upload me and prepare to defend. I'm in, Tenno. This will take a moment. Still working on it. Continue to defend. Location reached. Drop me in and defend our position. I'm in, Tenno. This will take a moment. Still working on it. Continue to defend. Stay focused. There's a heavy unit approaching. Were against us, Tenno, but we did it. Mission complete. Excellent work, Tenno. Find them and take them out. It was difficult to locate the source vector of this sector's infestation, but you are finally here. Be wary. The creature has grown unfathomably strong through centuries of absorbing matter and self-replication. juggernaut. They were lured out by the death of infested. Lay low, and it should go away or amp up the fight to draw it out. Deep within this millennia-old Orokin-turned-infested ship lurks a creature created to fight in the old war. Make your way to its location and dispatch this monster. Detecting signs of a juggernaut. Move on. You are safe. Multiple targets ahead. Stay focused. There's a heavy unit approaching. bothering us anymore. Let's get out of here.
Well, well, well. If y'all ain't my favorite brand of free-range lunatic.
Target down. Assassination contract complete. Great work, Tanner.
You keep being you, dreamers. Yeah.
assassination target is nearby. Seek and destroy. This place is crawling with infested. Unfortunately, something far more ominous awaits. Make your way deeper into the base. Listen for its screams. This will mean you are getting close. Chilling shrieks if you wish to stay alive. Stay focused. There's a heavy unit approaching. The creature is incredibly agile for a deformed quadruped. Keep moving to avoid being crushed. Target spotted. Stay sharp. This one is a handful. Stay focused. There's a heavy unit approaching. focused. There's a heavy unit approaching. focused. There's a heavy unit approaching. Target down. Assassination contract complete. Great work, Prex. They won't be bothering us anymore. Let's get out of here.
These are a bargain, just for you. You scratch our backs, we'll scratch yours.